Just I'm okay. I'm okay.
Okay, so I'm here today to answer all of your guys' questions.
Everyone thought the biggest part of this Britney Spears DUI arrest story was the arrest itself. But then her former assistant stepped in and used one word that changed everything: suspicious. That single comment pushed the story out of the usual celebrity news cycle and into something much murkier. Because now people are no longer just asking what happened on the road that night. They are asking whether this was simply a serious mistake, or whether the timing points to something deeper that Britney's longtime supporters have feared for years. And when a person from her inner circle sounds the alarm like that, the internet does what it always does. It starts connecting dots, revisiting old wounds, and looking at every detail like it might mean more than it seems. What makes this story hit differently is that Britney Spears is not just any celebrity. Every headline about her comes with a long emotional history attached to it. People do not read Britney news in a neutral way anymore because her name instantly brings up the conservatorship, the court battle, the Free Britney movement, the years of public scrutiny, and the feeling that the full truth about her life was never as simple as it looked from the outside. So when news broke that she had been arrested in Ventura County on March 4, 2026, on suspicion of driving under the influence, it was already going to explode online. But once the arrest report was followed by a claim that the whole thing felt off, the story became something much bigger than one late-night legal incident.
Black sedan, erratic braking, swerving, and driving with no taillight.
I think there are some people out to get her.
First, let's lock in what is actually confirmed because that matters. Britney Spears was arrested on suspicion of DUI in Ventura County, California on March 4, 2026 by California Highway Patrol officers. Reports said she was released the following morning through a cite and release process, and she is expected to appear in court on May 4, 2026. Those are the hard facts at the center of the story. The arrest itself is real, the legal process is real, the court date is real, and that matters because once a celebrity story starts picking up emotional speculation, it becomes very easy for the facts to get buried under theories, reactions, and people projecting older narratives onto a new situation.
We all think it's a push to put her back in a conservatorship. Because guess what happened when the conservatorship stopped? People stopped getting money.
But the reason this topic took off the way it did was not just because Britney was arrested. It was because Sean Phillip, her former assistant, and someone widely seen as part of her trusted orbit, spoke out after the news broke. He did not just say he hoped she was okay. He publicly suggested that the arrest was suspicious, and that is the comment that changed the entire tone of the story. Suddenly, the conversation was no longer only about driving under the influence. Now it was about whether outside forces, bad timing, or hidden motives might somehow be part of the picture. And the second that kind of language enters a Britney story, fans are not going to let it go.
I personally don't think she has access to all her finances, but a lot of other people do. And I don't think it's fair. I encourage her to speak for herself because she can squash everything in a second.
According to the reporting around Sean Phillip's comments, he suggested that there may be people who are out to get Britney. That is a heavy thing to say publicly, especially in the middle of an active legal story. It instantly triggered a familiar reaction among longtime followers of Britney's life, because for many of them, the idea that powerful people might still be circling her is not some wild new theory. It is a fear that never fully went away. The conservatorship may have officially ended in 2021, but the emotional aftermath of that era is still very much alive. Her father, Jamie Spears, who controlled her life as conservator for 13 years, has not publicly commented. So when Sean Phillip said the situation felt suspicious, he was not tossing out a random dramatic word. He was tapping straight into a public anxiety that has been sitting just below the surface for years. And then came the part that made people really start looking at the calendar. Sean Phillip reportedly connected his concerns to Britney's recent financial moves, especially the fact that she had just gained a major new level of financial independence after reportedly selling rights tied to her music catalog. That timing became a huge part of the conversation. Because in celebrity stories, money changes everything. And when money gets mentioned right after a headline like this, viewers immediately assume there could be more going on behind the scenes. It does not prove anything by itself. But it gives people a reason to question why this happened now and whether the timing was just bad luck or something that deserves a closer look.
Oh my God.
The catalog angle added fuel because Britney's business decisions have always been watched closely, especially after everything she went through regarding control over her finances and career. Reports said Britney sold rights to her catalog to Primary Wave in February 2026, a deal widely reported to be worth around $200 million, though the exact structure of that arrangement was not fully public. That is the kind of figure that gets attention all by itself. But when you pair it with a DUI arrest just weeks later, and then layer Sean Phillip's warning on top of that, you suddenly have a story that feels bigger and more emotionally loaded than a standard entertainment headline. This is where the story becomes especially powerful for viewers, because it creates two completely different ways to interpret the same headline. One version is simple. Britney was arrested in a serious legal incident, and the focus should be on accountability, safety, and what happens next in court. The other version is far more charged. In that version, the arrest is not being read as an isolated mistake at all. It is being viewed as something happening in a wider context of pressure, money, vulnerability, and possible manipulation. That split is exactly why people cannot stop talking about this. It is not just one event. It is two competing narratives fighting for control of the same story. But then Britney's side added another twist because her manager, Cade Hudson, did not echo Sean Phillip's suspicious theory. In fact, Hudson's public reaction pointed in a very different direction. The incident was reportedly described as serious and completely inexcusable, and the statement suggested Britney needed to take responsibility and use this as a chance for overdue change. That matters a lot because it grounded the story back in the legal reality of what happened. It also created tension between the emotional narrative being pushed by a former insider and the more direct tone being used by Britney's own camp. So now viewers were left with a new question. Who is reading this situation more clearly? The worried former assistant or the people speaking officially on her behalf? That contrast is what gives this story its staying power. If Sean Phillip had spoken and Britney's camp backed him up, the narrative would be cleaner. If Britney's camp had responded and no insider had raised alarm, the narrative would also be cleaner. But that is not what happened. Instead, the public got two very different signals at the same time. One signal said something feels wrong here, the other said this was an unacceptable incident, and Britney needs help and change. That kind of split keeps people watching because it creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is what drives endless discussion. Fan theories, headlines, reaction videos, and arguments in comment sections.
When it comes to people making mistakes, I understand that, but I think everybody deserves privacy.
Then another familiar name entered the picture and made the story even louder. Sam Asghari, Britney's ex-husband, also commented publicly after the arrest. He spoke about Britney's struggles and called for privacy and support, which added another emotional layer to the coverage. He did not directly confirm Sean Phillip's theory, but his comments kept the focus on Britney's well-being rather than just the legal issue itself. And that matters, because once people close to Britney start talking, the public immediately reads those words for hidden meaning. What makes Britney stories different from most celebrity stories is that her audience is always watching through two lenses at once. There is the present-day headline, and then there is the history behind it. In Britney's case, that history is impossible to ignore. Years of public breakdown coverage, family conflict, legal restrictions, fan activism, and a conservatorship battle have changed how people interpret every new development. As she detailed in her best-selling memoir, The Woman in Me, the control went deeper than most people realized. So when Sean Phillip says suspicious, many fans do not hear a theory, they hear a pattern. Whether that pattern is real or not is another question, but emotionally, that is how this story lands. At the same time, there is a real danger in running too far with that feeling. Concern is not proof, suspicion is not evidence. And one of the fastest ways a celebrity story loses credibility is when people treat emotionally powerful speculation as if it has already been confirmed. Right now, the proven facts are still limited. Britney was arrested. She was released. She has a court date. Sean Phillip questioned the timing and suggested something was off. Cade Hudson called the incident serious and inexcusable. Sam Asghari called for support. Everything beyond that lives in the space between concern and assumption. That is the line people keep blurring, and it is exactly why this story feels so chaotic.
She's an amazing mom. We used to go out together, just us and the kids, nobody else. We would go to the zoo, we'd do things. We would just go do things. And there was never a problem.
There's also something else happening here that should not be ignored. Britney is one of the few celebrities whose fan base often behaves more like a watch group than a fandom. Her supporters are not just following her music or public appearances. Many of them feel protective. They study legal details. They track timelines. They compare public statements. They look for inconsistencies, especially after documentaries like Framing Britney Spears exposed what happened behind closed doors. That means stories about Britney do not just become gossip. They become investigations in the eyes of the public. So the second Sean Phillip threw out the idea that the arrest might be suspicious, thousands of people were ready to dig in, compare dates, and ask what else might be going on behind the scenes. But for all the emotion, the next real turning point is still going to be what happens legally. Britney is expected in court on May 4, 2026, and that date now carries a lot more weight because the public conversation around the arrest has become so loaded. If this stays a straightforward legal matter, then Sean Phillip's comments may end up being remembered as a worried insider speaking from emotion. But if new details emerge, then people will go right back to his original warning and say he saw the bigger picture before everyone else did. That is what keeps this story alive. It is unfinished. So where does that leave things right now? Britney Spears is still facing a court date. The DUI arrest remains the only confirmed legal issue in this story, and the darker interpretation comes from people speaking around the situation, not from public evidence that proves some wider setup. But Sean Phillip's comments changed the emotional temperature of the conversation, and there is no putting that back in the box now. The public is watching the timeline, the money, the reactions, and every new statement that comes out. Whether this ends up looking like a painful wake-up call or something that raises even more questions, one thing is clear: people are not seeing this as just another celebrity headline. They are seeing it as a test of what Britney's life really looks like now, behind all the public noise. If you've got a take on whether this was simply a serious mistake, or whether the timing feels off to you too, drop it in the comments and subscribe for more updates on the stories everyone ends up talking about.